Did you know that, including Waco, we have actually 3 members of this religious community who are currently in the Unitarian Universalist formation process? Y'all are clearly doing something correctly. And I will take a moment and say, on March 9th, you can come to the ordination of one of them. Guess who? Yes, sorry, Rosemary Dodd will be ordained on March 9th. It's not a guessing game. I myself, however, was ordained quite a while ago. And when I was coming into the ministry, I wasn't really sure what kind of minister I would be. It all seemed fairly daunting. Preaching seemed well beyond my skill set. Administration, well, I went to Star King School for the Ministry. They don't teach administration there. We're Unitarian Universalists. I wasn't sure what kind of minister I wanted to be, but I knew exactly what kind of minister I didn't want to be. And that was a minister of religious education. No kids for me. This was partially personal preference. At the time, I was the only child, you know how we are, of a family that didn't really have friends with other kids. I didn't want children. I was childless by choice, and I plan to stay that way. You can laugh. I didn't really understand kids, so there was that, but it was really much more a professional concern. You see, in the long history of ministry, of Christian ministry, and of Unitarian and Universalist ministry, religious education is where they put all the women. If you felt the call of the Spirit, and you were a woman, you could go hang out with the kids. For most of our history, my beloved denomination did not ordain women. They didn't think that we got to stand up here and talk to the grown-ups. Sometimes progress was made. The first minister, female minister ordained in the United States was a woman. We put her on t-shirts all the time. The first woman ordained was a Unitarian. That's the way that sentence went. There were Unitarian men before her, I'm pretty sure. We ordained her in the mid-19th century, and slowly women started to enter our ministry. And they started to be, turns out, not bad at it. In the late 19th century, there was a group of women who were doing amazing work. We look back, we call them the Iowa Sisterhood. Apparently, Iowa, for much of this country's history, was just a hotbed of progressivism. Things have changed. It was a group of women who, without formal approval, went to the place where the men didn't want to go, built churches, fundraised, preached, made a life. And the Unitarian Association, I'm sure, thought for a minute about being excited by this influx of talent into their ministry, and then thought, no. And thus offered a new degree program at our seminaries for what they called a ministry assistant for women, which was religious education. And thus we were shoved back into the classroom for the next 60 years. And we tried again in the 60s. Now look, our ministry is now actually more female than male. We have come, as the old ad said, a long way, baby. But the but is always there. Our biggest, most impressive, best paid pulpits are usually filled by men. Our religious educators are usually still women. And so I knew I didn't want that. In a long life of never once being considered butch, I was going to have a masculine ministry. I was going to preach and be in charge. I wasn't going to be with all the other women in religious education with the children. Having said all that, who here wants to guess what my first job in ministry was? I was the minister for youth and young adults, which is 11 to 30-year-olds, which seems like a pretty big range until you know that that is the least represented age range in our congregations. And if you, like me, think that's a problem, come talk to me, because I have some plans about that. But I was the minister for 11 to 30-year-olds, which meant I got to sit with young adults who were grappling with the fact that they felt called to a religious community, but none of their peers understood why. I organized programs for our teenagers where they grappled with who they were and what they were becoming, what the role of their faith would be in their lives. And I got to do coming of age with our tweens. If you're not familiar, Coming of Age is a program in which we invite 7th and 8th graders into an intensive year of reflection, of imagining what their religious identity will be and who they want to be in the world. They're assigned a mentor in the congregation who helps guide them. My mother is still having coffee with the 32-year-old that she mentored 20 years ago. It's a way to build intergenerational community and to take seriously the religious faith of our young people. And at the end, after a year of this, they get up, stand in the pulpit, and give what we call their creedal statement. This is what I believe. And I have always thought that if we're going to ask a bunch of 12-year-olds to do that, perhaps I should make all of you do it as well. But then I remember that I'm a Unitarian Universalist and I can't make anyone do anything. More's the pity sometimes. They get up and they say what they believe. And I have never been prouder. I was sitting in the back with my little I don't do children's help, weeping. So proud of these kids, and also with my heart breaking for them a little bit as well. Because in this important moment of starting to say what they believe, I had also watched them starting to wonder if there were things that didn't fit. Parts of their personality that had to be maybe ignored a little bit for the identities they were forging. If maybe this sense of ownership might be held too tightly, might someday keep them from imagining themselves as different than who they are right now. Of course, that is the act of loving children, is being proud and heartbroken at the same time. But one of the reasons I love tweens doing this so much is we all do this, right? We tell stories about ourselves. And sometimes they're limiting. And sometimes we have to pretend some stuff isn't true, but when you're 11, you're just not that good at it yet. So you can see this active formation happening, as opposed to us adults who have gotten so good at telling the story of who we are that we've actually convinced ourselves as well as other people that the inconvenient part isn't true, or that we are exactly as we were when we were 16 and 26 and 36, yes, even 36. After that year, I entered into my first full-time parish ministry, transformed. My work with the teenagers and the young adults had opened up my heart to the possibility that I wanted to do something other than stand up here and talk to the grown-ups, as much as I love doing that. I spent time in RE. I taught OWL. If you ever get the chance to be OWL trained, sex ed in church is the best. I taught OWL, I hung out in the RE committee, I fell in love with an entire congregation's worth of kids. And in that falling in love actually opened to the possibility that I might fall in love with my own someday as well. The decision to take this job that I didn't want and I was sure wasn't for me changed my whole life. And there is a world where I didn't do that, where I was so scared of telling the story that I didn't want, that I found something else to do, that I stayed away. Or that I took that job and then just afterwards was like, well, that was an anomaly, none of that. The person I was didn't fit with this new information. I had a choice. I could change, or I could cling tightly. I could cling tightly to not a false reality, I was that person, but to a different one. I think sometimes when it comes time to change our lives, we think it will be easier if we look back and say, well, that wasn't working, I'm trying something new. But I wonder if it actually isn't easier, better, more real, to look at the people we were and to thank them for getting us here. To not say, this isn't who I was supposed to be, but this is who I was supposed to be to get me where I am now. Every person I have been has equipped me for this moment. Every person who was different than I am now, and every person who was the same, has got me here, ready for what is next. Hold your past self gently. Thank every part of your life for getting you here, or else it's gonna keep yanking you back. We are people who can change, if only we would let ourselves. We are people running into a new year, and so I would ask, what is it that it is time for you to love and time for you to leave? May it be so. Amen.